Well, welcome. We're so happy to have so many of you here tonight. This is really great. I think exceeded your expectations, Heidi, or not?
Oh, great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just before we get started, I just want to give a word of thanks and bless our evening. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing every person in this room here tonight. I pray that a word will be spoken that is a learning, that is a new thought, that is a surprise, Lord, and that will impact someone, Lord, for you. I pray for just this conversation, for our panelists tonight, for the wisdom that I know that they'll share, and just pray for good learning. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So, grab food real quick if you haven't already, but hopefully you're all set. We're going to go ahead and get started. I could never do justice to introducing this panel, so I'm going to let them do that for themselves. But first, my name is Dee Pierce. I serve as the director of the Center for Vocation and Career. We are absolutely delighted. To partner with the Center for Faith, Politics, and Economics to put on this event. Although in truth, Heidi did all of the work. So she's
Heidi.
I got the privilege of doing this because I am in a dual income marriage. My husband and I have been married for 28 years, so we have U2B. And for the bulk of that, we both have worked at very different levels. So I'm really excited to be in this role and to help you kind of learn a little bit from these alumni and faculty. So Bonnie, would you get us started? I'm going to ask them to share just a really high level of their vocational journey, their career path, and what their spouse does. And your connection to Wheaton would be fun too.
Okay. I graduated from Wheaton a long time ago. My parents met here, and two sets of aunts and uncles and cousins, and big family school. So I love Wheaton. I actually studied education at Wheaton. I taught school for 5 years, then I went into business. I had a 30-year business career, 28 years with the Coca-Cola Company. Last several years, I was Senior Vice President of Global Customer Leadership. Did a lot of global and U.S. travel with them. And for the last 5 years, I worked for World Vision, 4 of them based in London at their global executive offices as Chief Development Officer. My husband and I have been married for 25 years in March, on the exact same day and year as we found out as Kristen's been married the same exact day and year we got married. That was interesting. And my husband is a consultant with a partner in a consulting firm that focuses on client retention, and also worked for Procter & Gamble and Aramark for 20 years.
That's great.
All right, can you hear that? All right, so my name is Brian McGraw. I teach political theory here at Wheaton College. I'm chair of the politics and IR department. So I have, except for working here, this is my 11th year here at Wheaton. I actually went to Vanderbilt as an undergrad, where I met my wife. After which I did one stint in grad school, spent some time as an Army officer, went back to grad school, and teaching here for 11 years. This is my 11th year now. My wife is a neurologist over at Central DuPage Hospital. She treats mostly people with Parkinson's disease or similar sorts of movement disorders. And we have 3 kids, 2 in high school, 1 a junior, 1 a freshman, and then a 3rd in middle school.
Hi, my name is Kristen Colber-Baker. I graduated in '86, which means I probably went to school with some of your parents. I was a business econ major when I was here, and I have started out in finance, spent 19 years in finance across 3 different companies, and about 5 years ago switched into what's called talent development, and I'm with Mars, so Snickers, M&Ms, all of the candies that you love. And talent development is really about taking the employees that you have in an organization and helping them grow their capability to be more for themselves as well as for the organization. And as Bonnie already shared, we were married on the same day, same year. didn't know each other until this evening. My husband is also a consultant, spent 20 years with Accenture, and is now a partner in a boutique firm focusing on leadership development and executive coaching. We have 2 boys, one at the University of Michigan. Unfortunately, he did not make the right choice. And a second son who is a senior in high school.
I'm Jeremy Cook. I teach economics here. I went to Hope College. I majored in econ. After Hope College, I worked in consulting for a couple years, went back to school. In grad school, I was getting my PhD at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I met my wife. She was in grad school as well. And we got married actually in my first year here at Wheaton, and we've been married for 6 years. She's a clinical pharmacist at Loyola University Hospital in Maywood, and she works with the heart transplant team. So she advises doctors on different dosages for patients who go through transplants, because your body rejects new organs with this sort of suppress their immune system. So she does it. We have one daughter. She's a year and a half, and she's a lot of fun.
Great, thank you. So, in all honesty, these panelists shared a lot of wisdom and information with me beforehand, so I'm going to kind of unpack that with you and help you learn from some of their experience. Lots of good content here, so I'm really excited for what we're going to cover. And then we will save some time toward the end for you to ask some of your burning questions, so you have an opportunity to do that as well. So panelists, one of the things I noticed that each of you really commented on, words that you used, were things like partnership and team. And I just wondered if a couple of you would elaborate on that notion a bit for our students.
They're all looking at me, so I guess that's my cue. Yeah, I think that when you marry your life partner. You're not just a life partner, personally and at home and with your children and in your faith, but in your work. And one of the things I have that's been especially important in our marriage is that we've both supported each other professionally, that we love that about each other, and we encourage that, and we've taken turns at different times just making sure that we're playing important roles in each other's lives. Speaking for my husband, when I've needed him to be with me, whether it was at something to do with Coca-Cola in Atlanta or in Shanghai at a customer conference, really all over the world, every time I've said, I really need you there, he has been there. It's usually when something with spouses and customers were involved, and I needed my husband with me there, and not only was he there to help me with my job, but because he was in business and business management and in sales as well, he was a big asset to me, and I tried to be that to him too. One of the things that I think isn't always spoken about is when two of you are working, it really takes the pressure off of just one person to be the sole financial provider for a family. That allows both of you to make better decisions professionally, to be less anxious about finances, and I would say it also helps women to take their jobs more seriously when they have a serious career and not just a secondary career, not just I'm doing this kind of part-time. You stick in there longer when you have difficult bosses or difficult situations. If you're just kind of extra part-time funding, it's easier to just say, I'm out of here. The full-time breadwinner really doesn't have that luxury. Mm-hmm. When you both work and you both are in professional careers, you both take it more seriously, and you have someone to bring home problems to and talk to that can understand and encourage and support you and pray together with you. So that's the kind of partnership I've been fortunate to have with my husband. So that's what I mean when I say that.
Partnership, great. Jeremy, I want to ask a question of you. You talked about not looking at the give and take that happens in that partnership as a sacrifice, but instead really being able to talk about what you're getting, the good stuff. I wondered if you might share a little bit, unpack that a little bit for our students.
Sure, yeah. So when I emailed Dee that, I was thinking of a specific example of, so my wife goes to work really early, so she's out the door by 6 a.m., and that means I'm left with my daughter, who's awesome. But that means that once we had my daughter, I could no longer get up early as well and come to campus when it was quiet and I could get a lot of work done. So I was sacrificing my productivity time, right? Getting ready for class or doing research or doing something before everyone else is around. And it's easy to be bitter about that, like, oh, I'm losing my productivity, where's that gonna go? But then eventually it kind of struck me, I get to hang out with my daughter for an hour and a half every morning before I take her to daycare. And that's just like an experience that like a lot of people don't get, and a lot of people don't get for constraints that they can get that, but they choose not to as well. So when I think about losing this productivity time, I also think about like, well, in 10, 20 years, she may not remember, but like I'll remember these like really good times.
Yeah.
Are sort of priceless.
Yep. She'll remember. Not the specifics, but she'll know the relationship. Yeah, for sure. That's great. Kristen, you shared that your partnership has been a lot of flexing, being nimble, kind of being creative in the way you've divided and conquered. So would you talk to us a little bit about how you did that throughout, even before children, and then after, kind of the evolution of what that looked like?
Yeah. So when I met Joe, I was already post-grad school, had started a career with PepsiCo, and was pretty career-minded. And so part of my filter, if you will, in the people I dated had to do with whether or not I felt like they were up for a partnership that would include me continuing in a career. I was not married to the notion that my spouse would have a full-time career, but I was pretty convinced that God had called me to work in business for the long haul, and that was the assumption that I was going with. And so when, because my parents had a much more traditional marriage and traditional roles within the marriage, I had a lot of fear about that potentially being where I would end up. And so needless to say, Joe and I had a lot of conversations before we ever got engaged so that I could gain some comfort around where he was coming from. And I think one really pivotal moment was for us when we had been married a couple of years. I got a call and a promotion opportunity in another city, and Joe readily said, let's do it, knowing that it would be a change in location for him, even though he was able to stay with the same firm. But in terms of the give and take, I mean, for us, it's really come into play after we had kids. So and our older son is now 20, so at no time have we both worked full time. So for many years after our first son was born, we both worked 80%, 4 days a week, which when you're in large corporations generally means full time, but everybody thought it was 80%. It kind of allowed the flexibility that we needed. And we had a nanny 3 days a week, and Joe was home on Mondays, I was home on Fridays. Another point was 11 years ago when I joined Mars, it was a full-time role with a fair amount of travel, and that was the point at which my husband left Accenture, joined a boutique consulting firm, and worked about 2/3 time for a number of years while the boys were in junior high and high school. And it was also during that time, so there were 7 summers in a row where our boys had nannies from Wheaton College. And that has been an unbelievable blessing. And we still keep in touch with these 7 guys. We've gone to their weddings, we've celebrated their babies being born. And so my boys got to grow up having exposure and super fun summers with 7 different Wheaton College guys. And it's just been one of the unique ways that we've made our arrangement work. in sort of a creative fashion.
That's great. Have others on the panel seen kind of that give and take throughout your marriage?
Yeah, and I think the key is really just thinking about it as you were saying, it's about thinking about it as a team, right? When you're making these decisions, you're of course concerned with what the individuals are doing, the callings and opportunities, but really you're concerned about what's going to affect you as a team. So I had my first academic job was at Pepperdine in Malibu, California, where it's 70 degrees in February, I left that job. I left that job after the first year for the frozen wastes of Illinois, in large part because there wasn't anything there that was really suitable for my wife. So she's a movement disorders doctor. She sees people with Parkinson's disease. People with Parkinson's disease, they talk, they walk, they do everything very slowly. And the one sort of halfway decent job she had, well, they wanted her to see a new Parkinson's patient every 15 minutes. Well, that's just bad medicine, right? And so I walked away from a very good tenure track job at a top 50 university, not knowing what I was going to do, because I didn't have this job at the time, because it was bad for her and it was bad for us. Similarly, before we came here, we were living in Athens, Georgia, my wife's hometown. Her great practice, a few minutes from the house, parents are 10 minutes away, and I got this job offer from Wheaton College, this place outside of Illinois. Illinois, who wants to live in Illinois? And we thought about it, we prayed about it, and finally Martha says, well, I will move to Wheaton. It was hard. And it was not a thing that she wanted to do so much, but the option was me not be able to fulfill my calling, what I really felt called to do, and it's been a great blessing. We've loved being here. It's been awesome, but it took some chances to say, okay, this is not what we're. If we go this way, that's not good for us. And sometimes you have to spend some time noodling it through. Sometimes you have to make some short-term sacrifices, some medium-term sacrifices. But the alternative is, well, not good.
It sounds like both of you really took the long view and thought about the whole family as you were making some of these decisions. So a lot of wisdom in not going for the short-term decision.
Right.
Yeah. Jeremy or Bonnie, anything to add to that? Great. All right. Kristen, one of the other things you talked about, our team was kind of wrestling with this topic as we were talking about this evening, is just all the things that have to get done in the house. So we talked about laundry earlier, so I know it's the burning question of the night. Real quick, who does the laundry?
Oh, my husband has.
Your husband does the
He's
laundry.
much, much better at it.
Okay.
He won't even let me actually do it because I shrink things and bleed things.
That's great.
I'm
Strategic.
not allowed to do laundry because
You're not allowed.
I shrink things and leave things.
Okay.
But I do fold.
You fold, okay. Kristen, your house?
Put 'em away.
Yeah, so I think we stumbled into this, what I think is just fabulous situation where when the boys were very little, as I said, Joe worked 4 days a week, I worked 4 days a week, and we had a nanny 3 days a week. And so when babies are little, they take naps, which means the nanny is available to do stuff, including laundry. And then as the years went by and the nannies exited, we came to this notion that, okay, we've always lived near a university, 1 or 2 universities, right? And now in the town where we live, about 25 miles east of here, there are 2 really small universities or colleges, and we can hire students for $15 an hour. Why would we do laundry? Why would we grocery shop? So essentially the theme here is that anything that in our family that does not touch the kids, vacation planning, pulling together papers to send to the tax accountant, anything that does not touch the kids is outsourced. So it's something, and in the beginning of your career, you may be able to afford only a little bit of outsourcing, right? It may just be house cleaning, maybe. But I would strongly encourage you all just to think about how you can leverage outsourcing to prioritize your time, to do what you really love doing and what you feel called to do.
The
So
important
in
stuff
our
like your
family,
kids.
there's a college student who does our laundry.
Nice.
So my wife does the laundry because she's pretty good at it, and at least that's what I tell her. She's really good.
All you gotta do is ruin a couple of shirts at the beginning. You're done.
I don't like, no. I don't like this advice.
Don't fall for it, ladies.
Don't. Do not fall for it. Yeah, go.
It's hard to overcome some of these sort of like social norms and stigmas of outsourcing. So an example is my wife works a ton and she's really busy, and we're both really busy. And then she figured out that there's these local grocery stores. There's this technology that you can order groceries online, and they don't deliver, but you pick it up. And it took her so many weeks to feel okay with that.
Yeah.
Because she's like, I feel like I'm not providing for my family.
Yeah.
If I actually have someone go pick out my groceries, I just stop and like get them delivered to my car and I just drive this way home. And overcoming these sorts of things, not that she's overcome that sort of social stigma that she probably imagined herself. Like she loves it and it's great, and it saves her, half hour every time she goes grocery shopping, or I go grocery shopping. So don't be afraid to overcome those sort of traditional obstacles for.
And it's worth noting that everyone outsources, right? If you go to the grocery store, you've outsourced the people who go and pick your food or process your food and bring it to you and do all that sort of stuff anyway. So you're already doing it, right?
Yeah. That's great. I like that. That's good thinking. It was interesting. We also had the creative idea of maybe your toilets don't have to be washed every 2 weeks or something in our team. So you're gonna make but these things have to get done somehow. So yeah, that's great. Thank you. Brian, we're gonna stick with you. You made a comment that said, we are not PTA parents because we can't do everything. So you went on to add that there are just certain spaces that are kind of off limits and to the rest of the world. And talk a little bit about how you do that and manage that with your family.
So the truth is that if both spouses are working, it's just a time constraint, right? I mean, time is really one of those non-fungible things. You're either going to do one thing or another thing. There is the idea of multitasking is kind of a myth. And so when we moved to Wheaton back in 2008, and my kids were, I guess it was 7, 4, and 1. So the oldest was in first grade. I realized when you show up the first day, or like parent-teacher conferences or something like that, and you're signing up for sort of, doing this party or that party, or act as a chaperone for this or for that, I realized, man, I can't do any of this, right? Or be on the PTA board or whatever. You're just like, oh, I don't understand how to do any of this sort of stuff. And then one day one of my kids was complaining because they said, you guys don't ever come to our, whatever it was at the elementary school, I don't know, just some, who knows. And I'm sure it was very important to them, and they will, deeply regret it one day or something. But they said, and I goes, well, I just don't have time, honey. We both work, and I can't be at everything, and so I have to prioritize things. And so we really came to the view that, well, there are just some sort of things that we're not going to be able to do. I coached my kids' soccer teams all the way through when they were playing rec league, and I have great memories. But sometimes I was coaching 2 teams a season, so I could do that. But little did they know that the reason I was coaching was that I could control practice time and have them back. So really, there's a strategy here too, and I have these awesome memories, right? And so by sort of not doing some things, you're able to do other things. And you just kind of have to pick your spots. And, I think our kids have survived.
They're
Some
reasonably
of you
well
know them, some of
adjusted.
you met them.
So one thing I would add too, so yes, definitely you want to outsource anything neither of you want to do that's not important to do. But you also, when you divide up your work, do it by your strengths and by what makes sense, not because your mother did that or your father did that. So besides my husband really being much better at laundry, he worked from home. The whole time we've been married, as a consultant, he had the luxury of officing from home. So it was really easy for him to go throw in a load of laundry. Whereas I went to an office and did way more travel than him. It was really hard for me to do it. I love to cook. He's really not good at it. I don't really want, but I'll make the grocery list for what I'm going to cook, and he really likes to grocery shop. And again, has more flexibility in his time. So the things we divvied up were things that kind of made sense to our life, or that one of us really liked to do and the other one really didn't, not because we had some image of it supposed to be done this way.
I actually would like to dig into that a little bit more with all of you. The notion of kind of the way it was done in your household where you grew up, or where your spouse grew up, and how did you know to make a conscious decision that we don't have to follow what we saw, what we grew up with? How did that come about?
I think so. I do all the cooking in our family, which is really odd because Martha's a better cook than I am. And it really happened when she was in residency. I was in a PhD program, and she wasn't getting home till 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And I frankly got tired of eating at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And so finally I said, fine, I'll start cooking, right? I can read recipes, right? I can do this. And it was just a matter of like whose schedule works better, right? And I think one of the things I try to tell students sometimes is that I grew up in a family that was pretty traditional. Martha grew up in a family that was pretty traditional, and there were scripts, right? There were kind of scripts about sort of what do you do? And I grew up, I think, with the kind of expectation of those scripts. I hadn't really thought about it. But then at some point I realized that script just doesn't work. I mean, you just that doesn't function. And one of the things about, I think is probably true more for you than it was for any of us, is that you're entering in a world where there really aren't scripts. There aren't really cultural scripts so much. And so you have freedom to make choices about what makes sense for you. Taking advantage of strengths, covering over for weaknesses, taking different seasons in life, doing different things. Those are really powerful opportunities. It's harder sometimes because you actually have to come to agreement on that. I mean, I think that my wife doesn't like so much that I don't necessarily like to cook vegetables as much as she would like to have me cook vegetables. You know, I have a view that if you're not eating one of God's little creatures, you're not really eating. But that's that you know, it happens in a big compromise. And I think that's an important opportunity and a sort of a responsibility.
Yep. Do you have anything to add?
I would, well, a little bit different story. So you asked, how did that come to your awareness?
Yeah.
And so I was, my husband would say I was one of the most disconnected people he had met from, and by disconnected I mean intellectually I could say something, but emotionally I wouldn't necessarily be connected to it. This is, hopefully I'm a bit more connected now. But I think our awareness, or my awareness around some of these scripts that we've grown up with really came as a result of after we got married and moved into the same apartment. It's the living together, doing things day to day together became very real, and that's when the conflict started. And that's shortly thereafter I was diagnosed with clinical depression and spent the first year of our marriage in therapy, medication. Second year of our marriage, we were in therapy together. And although that, I understand that's a very unusual situation, is to have the first 2 years of your marriage be really, really awful. And yet through that experience, we grew so close and had to really confront some of the scripts that we'd each grown up with and some of the assumptions that we were placing on one another, that it built a super strong foundation from the very beginning that has served us well. And in the world of God gets the last laugh, for the last probably 10 to 15 years, one of our biggest volunteer activities with the various churches we've been a part of is mentoring engaged couples.
So
and
good.
leveraging all of the hardship that we went through. But it was really through conflict that we came to understand the scripts that we had for ourselves and for each other.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Bonnie.
So I think the way I broke out of it, besides having a rebellious streak in me, is I didn't marry until my mid-30s, so I was doing all this stuff on my own. And my husband had been divorced for several years. He had a 14-year-old boy when we married. And he had lived on his own as an adult for about 8 or 9 years by then. So we both knew all the work that it really takes to kind of have a job and take care of your home. And so it was kind of a relief, and we were both open to, just not that many people get married right out of college anymore. Some do, but many, many don't. And so you learn how to, okay, who's going to pay the bills? We both do it. And who's going to, and we just kind of had to, and so we were freeing each other up a lot too. And going with who wanted to do something or was better at. So that was part of it.
Fun fact, the average age for marrying for women today is 27, and the average age for men is 29. So interesting to think about how that compares to what we experience at Wheaton. A little surprising, I suspect. Jeremy, did you want to speak into that, or you good? Okay, well, can I ask you another question then, Jeremy? So, I have quoted you multiple times already today to our team, I think I even said it to Bonnie, like just multiple people. You said that you need to be creating habits today, before marriage, before family, that you will take into life after marriage and with family, but really that foundation begins now. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about some of those habits that you did or didn't form, that maybe you wished you had, or you didn't, wished you hadn't, and just some of the advice you might share around that.
So I didn't get married right after college, so as Bonnie was saying, if you and your spouse sort of have adult lives that are separate from one another for a while, like you get into your ruts, like you like your alone time or how you do things, and all of a sudden you have a roommate, and that becomes difficult. But how you communicate with your spouse or future spouse is important. I think even in dating, a big thing for my wife, Abby, my wife's name, Abby and me, is that like learning to be proactive about like saying you're sorry or like asking for forgiveness. If we not even for like serious stuff, but like little things. Like, I'm sorry that I didn't sense that I needed to pick up the slack in some way or anyways. So I think that's pretty important. Communication is really important, and then how you structure your time. So if you're used to not being as organized with your time once you get married, especially once you have a kid or two, like it's hard to learn that after the fact. I think it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's great. Really, really helpful. Any other habits you all think are good to kind of pay attention to now?
Yeah.
The best habit my husband and I have ever had, and we started on day one of our marriage, is praying together before we get out of bed. Every morning that we wake up in the same place, and we take turns and we pray out loud. So it's like, no, it's your turn. Are you sure I prayed yesterday? Sometimes, but not usually. And it not only sets the tone for your day, you understand what's on each other's hearts.
Yeah.
You pray for your friends together, you pray for your work together, you pray for each other. It is the best practice. Do it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I would say if you don't air your grievances to your roommate now, there's an end in sight. That isn't actually the case when you get married, so you better learn how to talk about some of that stuff. Good habit to work on? Yeah, good. Bonnie, you also talked to us, you talked a lot about the value of men and women in the workplace considering each other equals and really being supportive and encouraging of each other. You also talked about the path for women potentially being a little narrower in terms of leadership opportunities. And I just wonder, we've talked a lot about what it looks like to be both working spouses in the home and what that looks like. I'm curious if you might speak into how having people who are partnered with someone who works changes the dynamic between men and women in the workplace.
Yeah, I thought we should talk about this because not everyone's going to be married right away. And just the importance not only of husbands and wives supporting each other, it's really important for men and women to support each other. It's important for the workplace. I've said in one of my classes, the classes that I spoke in today, was that learning men and women as colleagues. Do you have that in your talent development program? Good. That's, I'm not surprised. That's really important. So, like, I'm always a little discouraged when women's groups in companies form only for women. Like, there is some value in that, but that's not sufficient because men and women need to learn to work together as colleagues and peers and friends in order to work well on teams in business and to see each other as equals and peers. So I would suggest you really practice that in college and after college, and seek out friends of the opposite sex that you respect and admire if you're not working with them regularly, and learn to work together. Churches, it's fine to have a women's Bible study and a men's Bible study here and there, but most of them I think should be together.
Here, here.
Because churches should be at the forefront of helping men and women. What is that? Secret handshake? Wheaton secret handshake? So, you know, those are the kinds of things I would just say are good practice. And if you do things like that, not only will your careers be more successful and your life be more fulfilling, but your marriage will be better because you'll be good at it.
Yeah, that's great. Anyone else want to add to that?
I would say, and if you haven't studied this topic, I would suggest you Google it, unconscious bias. So we grow up in the world that we grow up in, right? In the part of the world that we grow up in, and the family that we grow up in, and the type of community that we grow up in. And the world that we experience becomes normal, right? And so we develop what are called unconscious biases, whether it's, so the example that gets talked a lot about in leadership literature is that if a female employee is bold and assertive, she is potentially going to be labeled a word that usually isn't used at Wheaton College. Yeah?
Starts with B and it ends with an H.
Yes. A man is going to be called, or a male colleague is going to be called a strong, standalone leader. Yeah? So that's one kind of really basic occurrence that you see, is that the same behavior is interpreted differently based on people's worldview about what is normal for men versus women, blacks versus whites versus Hispanics, right? And so I would encourage you to question your own biases, but what I've actually found more helpful is to your point, Bonnie, whether it's a friend who's, you know, in my case, a man, or somebody who's from a different ethnic or racial background, to help to challenge me, inviting them to challenge me when I'm allowing a bias to get in the way of a collaborative working relationship that most of the time I'd like to say I'm completely unaware of. I don't intentionally go into working situations or team situations with the intention of being a jerk. But sometimes that's how I show up, because an unintentional assumption or behavior gets in the way. So unconscious bias, something to look into.
It's a great one. Age falls into that as well. We see a lot. Those of us who are older, we're assumed to not be good at technology by some younger folks. And sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not. So there's just some interesting, it's fascinating to study that. Okay, social norms, and you've touched on that a little bit. And I want to talk about the fact that social norms put pressure on men and women differently. So a man who stays late to work is like, oh, good job. And a woman who stays late to work, who has children, might be kind of like, oh, well, what's she doing? Maybe judged or criticized. Similarly, if a man says, I need to leave and take care of my sick child, might get some eyebrows raised for him. So I wonder, have you encountered those kinds of social norms? How would you just advise us to think about them, to fight through them? Just your comments.
When I was in the Army, that was certainly that the norms were there. The expectation was you would spend, as many hours you could possibly spend in the office, and certainly those differences are out there. I think in general, I mean, my advice on this is that you've got to have some thick skin, right? You're gonna get pushback on the kind of choices you make, right? If you decide to go to 80%, someone's gonna look at you and go, so you're not really committed, right? You're not really yet. Or if you decide, to not, maybe you decide to sort of not take a promotion, right? Because it means moving your family, and that doesn't seem right at the same time, or sacrificing a particular kind of opportunity. You're gonna get pushback because the norm in any kind of organization, corporation, or whatever it is, is to sort of spend. I should say the norm. The tendency will always be to take as much of your time and energy as possible. And at some point, you just kind of have to accept that someone somewhere there is not going to like it, that you're going to go spend time and energy over here, not over there. I mean, at some point, you just kind of have thick skin and go, okay, right? I mean, that's so fine. And I'm going to do this really great job while I'm here, and I'm going to be committed. But these are the judgments I have to make, right? You can't live your life totally worried about what it is other people do. And I'll say just an additional thing on this. And I just know this from my wife's experience. Women in particular will get it from the church, right? You'll get it from the church and worried about you having a career and working. And at some point, you just kind of have to say, okay, these people I go to church with, and they're not super happy that I'm doing this, and well, God loves them anyway, right? And that's and eventually it'll be okay. I promise you, eventually it'll be okay. These are issues that my wife and I, that she really wrestled with when she first started working. And then at some point, I was like, well, we've made our choices. This is where I feel called to be, and I'm okay with that, right? So, it's not exactly a pleasant teaching, but a little thick skin will help on that.
Bonnie?
Just to build on that, that is one choice you can do, is because you can't live your life worried about what everybody thinks about you. But when I graduated from Wheaton, I decided I would not go to a church that didn't have women in leadership. And I made that decision, and I have not ever been a member of one. And I found good, faithful, conservative Christian churches that allow women in leadership. I am an elder at our church. I teach at our church. We have male and female pastors at our church. It's a strong conservative Presbyterian church. So don't let yourself think that that's the only option. You can also vote with your feet if you can't live with the situation. So there's lots of churches out there that not only think it's fine for women to work, but want the gifts and skills and abilities of women in their leadership too.
I'm really tired of being asked to work in children's ministry. It's not my gift. Not my gift. Did you want to add anything to it?
Yeah, for us, it's been the child care decision has been a big deal for us.
Yeah.
Particularly Christian communities, outsourcing child care can be frowned upon. So that's been something we've had to overcome. And part of it is kind of like what everyone else is saying. I'm an economist, so I think like in economic terms. So know your preferences and know your constraints, and don't let other people's preferences be your constraint. So know what you want, you and your partner want, and don't be constrained so much by what other people.
That's great. That's great. Well, I have one final question, and I'm going to open the floor to all of you. And you don't know this one's coming, so I apologize. It's a little bit of a surprise. Despite the 27 and 29 numbers, the reality is a lot of our students are engaged and will get married in the next couple of years. So I wonder what advice you would have for them. Kristen, you talked about, you had a conversation with Joe. and you were like, we're gonna put this on the table and we're gonna lay it out before we get married. What advice would you give to our students who are thinking about that, either now or, 7, 10 years from now, whatever your time schedule is? What advice would you give for them about the questions to ask, the conversations to have, just to prepare for what's to come? Yeah, we'll give you just a second because that was a surprise. I apologize.
I can go. I think you should think in terms of, there's a number of different ways to think about this. But think in terms of short term and long term. Most people, you might have kind of a long term vision for what it is you want to do. I knew in my junior year in college that I wanted to be an academic, right? And so I knew that required graduate school. I didn't quite understand how the absolutely horrible job market worked in academics, but I knew it was out there. And I knew that my wife's job required an internship and a residency, and then it turns out a couple of fellowships, right? So there was a lot of, we were 30 before we were done. Well, she was done being trained and whatnot. And then there's long-term thinking about, what kind of jobs and careers are we going to be doing? How flexible are they geographically in terms of kind of shifting? Because those are oftentimes the kind of the pivot points around which your careers will go, right? I can't pick up and just move to another university willy-nilly. My wife, she can move a lot more easily than I can, but it's not super easy, right? You have to build a new practice. You have to have a new set of patients. It's not all that easy. And so thinking about that, right? It's a little bit different than being in business, where maybe, it seems like my friends are in business and feel like they're switching jobs every third year, or something. But thinking maybe in terms of short term and long term about, okay, how can we make our double careers or dual careers match up, right? Where we can be in the same place, and maybe even sort of the timing might even kind of work. Because there are ways to make that happen. You just have to plan it.
Yeah. It's really helpful.
And I'll steal a word that Jeremy said earlier in different contexts, constraints. So talking early and often about what your non-negotiables are, right? So for me, I really did feel called to work in business for the foreseeable future. I didn't imagine that I would stay home when I had children. Thought maybe I might, but probably not. And so that was a conversation pretty early on with Joe and me, is that I was not expecting, I wanted to have children, was not expecting to stay home full-time with children. Do you want to stay home full-time with children? He goes, wow, never thought about that, because it wasn't in his script, right, his worldview. But just talking about those non-negotiables as early as you can, especially as it relates to constraints that you imagine related to your work calling.
That's great. Jeremy?
Now that with the long-run vision, there's a lot of path dependence early on. So if you don't proactively talk about what you want later on down the road, 5, 10 years, before you know, you're still stuck where you were. So continue to talk about your future long-run vision as well.
That's great. Great. Thank you so much. So, audience, I'm happy to let you ask a few questions for the remainder of our time. If anyone has yeah, go ahead, back there in the corner.
So since we're talking about dual income, I was wondering.
Why don't you stand up and talk really loudly so we can hear you? There you go.
Yeah.
And tell us your name, just for fun.
I'm Mercy, I'm a senior. I was wondering, since you're talking about dual income, if you could talk about how you handle the actual finances in the home, so who pays the bills, and financial planning for retirement, if you have different accounts, and even kind of the difficult question of like his, her bank accounts versus joint bank accounts, all of that.
It's a great question.
I'll start.
I think her bank accounts are problematic. When we got married, we just saw all things as belonging to us. We pooled all of our funds. We both make money, so my husband does not tell me what I can buy and what I can't, and how much money. We have a sense of what our budget is in terms of bills and that sort of thing, and we we started out because he moved to Atlanta from Philadelphia where I lived with me paying the bills, and I hated paying the bills. I would be in the worst mood for about 2 days afterwards. So he took him over about 3 or 4 years into it. You know, we definitely do retirement planning together. You should start early. It seems silly to be thinking about retirement planning in your 20s, but you know, a lot of companies have a lot of ways, you know, deferred compensation and 401ks and drips and all kinds of things. The sooner you start, the happier you'll be when you're older.
Senior series will tell you all about that.
So we
We've
do
also
that
done-
very much together.
Yeah, it's good.
And we, you know, I mean, in some ways when you're both working, finances are less of a strain and issue, which can often be the number. If you're going to talk about something, talk about finances, because that's the number one thing that causes divorce. People that spend or it's over money. So it's good to talk about that. But, you know, I certainly wouldn't advise you get into a situation where one of you controls all the money and gives the other some kind of allowance, or where you keep everything separate and have these kind of parallel financial lives. I've never seen that work.
Ditto. Great.
And I do think that one of the things that the kind of conversations you have to have about money and finances is that is thinking about what's important, right? If you have a house, or you have, you know, if someone particularly likes to travel, or you have particular projects you want to put resources to, talking about that is important. And talking about the money that you're giving away is important, right? We made a commitment very early on to we give away over 10% of our pre-tax income, and it's hard. I see those checks every time we get paid. That's the first set of checks that go out, but it's important, and you should talk about it and do it early. I mean, the numbers suggest that as incomes go up, the percentages of money that people give go down. You know, I think the average churchgoer in America gives roughly 2% of their income to whatever kind of, you know, nonprofit charity, including churches. So that's an important conversation to have, and it's one of the really nice things about being married is you can keep each other accountable. So at the end of the year, when we do taxes, my wife can say, because I do all the bills and stuff just for convenience sake. So did we give enough away? Did we give enough away?
Yeah.
And it's a good check.
It's a good feeling. Yeah. Great question, Marcy. Yes.
I'm Ken, and you guys talked a bit about traveling. I wanted to learn a little bit more about that and how you guys balance, say, a lot of long-term travel, because I want to go into a career which would require a lot of long-term travel. So how do you guys balance that with the distance and the time, and how that weighs on the relationship?
What do you consider long-term?
I mean, anywhere from like a few days to a few weeks, maybe, all across the world, possibly.
Okay.
So I travel a third of the time. I've always traveled between 20 and 33% time. I top out at 33%. I keep track. And the nice thing about texting and Snapchat and FaceTime is that you can stay connected way better than you could about 25 years ago. It is not the same as being at home. There are times when I'm at a fancy pants dinner in Shanghai, and I want nothing more than to be at home eating mac and cheese with my boys and my husband in the family room. Yeah. So it's not all glamour. It's a little bit glamour. It's not all glamour. But there are definitely ways to stay connected and to prioritize family time before or after, and also during.
That's great.
But you have to be intentional, especially when you're 13 hours time
Yeah.
zone difference.
Bonnie, did you want to speak to that as well?
Yeah, I mean, the use of technology, FaceTime, all of that, but also, you know, you kind of can keep a life going these days when you're traveling overseas. It's not like, oh, I'm unavailable and I can't possibly pay bills or follow up on this. I mean, you can actually still manage a lot of things in life from Korea or other places. So that's actually a good thing. And then I would just say, maximize maximize what you're doing when you're traveling so that your travel doesn't have to be so long. I mean, at first it's novel, but it's very grueling after a while. And so, make sure you're planning ahead and maximizing the meeting and effort and the number of places or countries you're going so that you don't have to travel as much. You can do a lot more work without traveling, by the way, once you know the people. So in a job, once you've kind of met face to face and you know each other and you build some sort of credibility with each other, you can get a whole lot done without being face to face.
That's a good word. Yeah, one more, I think. Or no? Oh, yeah, go Carlson.
I'm Carlson. I know that for y'all decided like different ways of taking care of the kids, whether that was daycare, having nannies. I know that a lot of students, myself included, are kind of concerned about how that might affect kids. So number one, like how did y'all come to that decision that that it wouldn't just be one of y'all staying at home the whole time? And number two, have you seen that come into play at all with how your children have developed?
So we always had, a combination of nannies and grandparents and me, because I had for a very long time a pretty flexible schedule. I still have a relatively flexible schedule. And it made sense for us. The cost was actually was about the same once we started having multiple kids, and so the cost for good daycare versus a nanny was not appreciably different. And it was easier in some ways, more flexible. I think for us it's always been really good. We've always had college students, and they've always cared a lot for our kids. They're probably a lot nicer than I am, and so there's certain kinds of advantages. My kids have probably sort of had advantages in that regard, and I don't think they would say that that my kids wouldn't say they sort of. I mean, they have a complaint here or there as they sort of look back. You hear stories that you didn't hear when they were really young, but on the whole, I think that they're okay. I don't think they ever felt like we were absent from their lives, which I think is kind of the worry, right? That you don't spend enough time investing in your kids, connecting to them, being the parent that you want to be. I don't think they ever kind of felt that way. But part of it was also I had a very sort of, I can work from a lot of different places, so it wasn't so much of that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, and I would add we chose a nanny because I was kind of paranoid. I wanted one-on-one attention when the first baby came along, and I would say we had 3 nannies over the course of 12 years, one for 7 years, and they were all believers. 2 were from Colombia, so our boys grew up bilingual, and those women prayed for my children, and they still do, and we still keep in touch with those women. So they very much became a part of our family. I'm convinced that God brought each of them to us. They would say that their work with us was a blessing because of the flexibility that we allowed them, because we honored their commitment to their family. So I think there's a lot of ways to think about whether it's a nanny or another arrangement, that being another element of parenting that God can use to even enhance the parenting that in my case came from me and from Joe. So I think that God can honor and use a lot of different arrangements, and there again it's important to understand what your preferences are, what your scripts are, and choose in prayer together what you believe God is calling you to best raise these little people that He's entrusted to you.
That's great. Jeremy, did you want to?
Yeah, so my daughter was in full-time daycare since she was about three months old, and we chose the daycare very carefully. Like she doesn't sit in front of the TV. She doesn't really know what a TV actually is, and she gets to do a lot of programs that we wouldn't be able to do with her at home. She has more social activity with other kids. She has more diverse experiences with people, and she's 1.5 now. Clearly, I think she's a genius.
I'm sure she is. Yeah.
Right.
So we feel like it's a good choice, but we also are very conscious of on Saturdays and Sundays, and when she, when we pick her up, like all of our hours that she's awake, we are interacting with her because part of it's for us because like we miss hanging out with her. So we're just very conscious about making the times we have with her very intentional.
I can say I'm on the other side of this because my children are now grown. And our girls both went to, we just took them to daycare. They both went to a Montessori school. And as you heard me say, children's ministry, not my thing. My children were very blessed by me not being with them all day long. I would not have been as entertaining, as educating. It's not how God wired me. So I think, Kristen, you said you were really called to business. Those are different skills than someone who's called to take care of a toddler. And so my children, it was really what worked well for my children. And I was telling a story of I saw my daughter in the city last night. She's 21 years old. We met for dinner at a restaurant. She pulled into the booth beside me because she wanted to love on Mama. Like, we have a fabulous relationship. She's very well cared for. She's extremely bright. So I'm a big advocate of what works for you. It could be all sorts of things.
I didn't raise children, but I had lots of family and
Yes.
friends that did. And the only thing I would add is we live in such a mobile society. Don't underestimate the value, especially when you have young children, of living near family. Don't abuse it, but living not too far from your parents or your grandparents or aunts or uncles who, especially when kids are young, would love to give you a break for, a special night out and whatever, and factor that in to where you make decisions about where you'll live, especially when you have young children.
That's really good. Well, I know I have taken away a lot tonight. I hope that all of you have as well. And I assume you'll hang around for a few minutes. I know you have families to get home to, so we want to be mindful of that. But thank you so much for coming. And if you have one last question that you want to snag someone with after we wrap up, certainly welcome you doing that. Thanks so much for coming. Let's say thank you.